Well, it's that time of year for the Northeast Nebraska Hamfest in Norfolk, Nebraska. When I came here last year in Rail Expedition number 5, I got my first look at the Nebraska Central Railroad, which is headquartered here in Norfolk, and I even saw some other neat things. This time, I have a much more detailed and wide area plan. After I see everything in Norfolk, I will continue down Highway 81 until I reach Columbus, Nebraska. Columbus has a very busy Union Pacific line and a massive ADM complex. Just next to the Hamfest is the line that leads from Nebraska Central's main yard up to the local industrials. 1005 and 1006 are both GP38-3s. 1005 was built in 1966 and 1006 in 1971. Both have bounced around a few different railroads over the years, and each have served some time on the Union Pacific. This is especially evident on 1005. The train heads to the main yard, which is the next place to see. The Nebraska Central Railroad was created in 1993 and runs on several former Union Pacific and BNSF branch lines. The locomotive roster consists of many 38 and 40 series EMD road switchers, many of which have come from these two Class 1s. The 4 engines in the 250 series are GP38-2s from the Southern Railroad, hence the bells being mounted high on the end of the long hood. 3002 and 3003 are both GP40-2s, and the 900s are GP38-3s. There are a few places to stop at along Highway 81 on the way to Columbus, such as at Enola. This SW1 was built in 1947, and so they say the co-op here still uses it. This has got to be the oldest diesel-electric locomotive that I have seen with my own eyes. Well, oldest that's still in use that isn't sitting in a museum. About a dozen miles north of Columbus, you can turn off onto the Nebraska 22 and go to Monroe. On the way to Monroe, you will find a Nebraska Central three-way junction. Here is SSRX 3510. It was built a GP38 in 1969 for the Penn Central, and of course later ended up on Conrail. In the late 80s, it was one of several dozen in the roster of the Chicago, Missouri, and Western Railroad, a Class II regional that lasted exactly 2 years. After a couple leasing companies, it now wears green and works under whoever SSRX is. The Union Pacific Yard in Columbus had 2 runaway cars, but other than that, the place is pretty fenced off. I headed to the southeast part of town where the big ADM facility is located. I found one switcher, MCP-7479. RailroadPictureArchives.net doesn't have a whole lot to say about this locomotive, or the seemingly Mexican railroad with which it is associated, so I'm going to call this an SW-1500 and move on. For my final act, I stop at Norfolk again on my way back home to see the big steel plant northeast of town. Last year I caught a few green EMD SWs, but unfortunately I was operating on my extremely low-quality Walmart camera on account of my old iPhone battery dying. But I'm not a caveman anymore. I have technology. By this time in the evening, the two green switchers must have regressed further into the yard, but this SW-1001 was sitting out in the open. LCDX 2020 was built in 1973 for the Reading Railroad. It follows a pretty common line of succession of New England-based locomotives, later moving to Conrail and then Norfolk Southern. Well, despite my technology, the picture still came out a bit grainy, probably since it was getting dark. Thanks for watching.